Hey everybody, today I want to talk to you a bit about the new feature set we have around Lightdash Validation. But before we kind of dig into a demo of using this feature set, I want to explain how we got here and the problems that we're trying to solve. So at my old company, I remember there was an experience where I was updating some really important metrics in our BI tool. And these metrics affected our KPI dashboard, some of our regulatory monitoring. Basically what I was touching was really important. And unsurprisingly, I broke these metrics. And I'd never received so many stressful Slack messages in such a little amount of time. And it's because of experiences like this and talking to our users about similar experiences that we decided to build the Lightdash Validator. Having accurate and reliable data is super important, and we all know that as data people. And knowing when it isn't accurate or valid is equally as important. So in this video, I want to talk you through how you can actually use a Lightdash Validator in your data development workflow to make sure that you're confident in developing your content and no one in your team has the same traumatic experience as I had. So I'm going to walk through an example now of developing a metric in my DBT model and then validating my changes before I try to merge them to production. Basically the flow that I wish I'd had when I broke all of those really important charts a few years ago. So I'm going to open up my text editor, which is VS Code, and here you can see I have a DBT project open. I have some models like orders, and within these models I have, beside these models I have YAML files, so schema files, which is where Lightdash pulls all the information where it can interact with these models. So here I have some dimensions and some metrics, and let's just say that I accidentally, or maybe on purpose, renamed a metric name. So I'm going to call this total orders from count distinct order IDs. And I'm going to run a Lightdash preview environment to check to see what these changes are kind of doing to my content. So for those of you who haven't run preview environments are a way of copying the content that you have in production and testing the changes that you've made in your DBT project in Lightdash. So if I've created a new metric or I've created a new dimension, maybe I want to see, like, is that metric calculation actually working the way I want it to, so I can plot its distribution, or I can look at existing content and see how the changes I've made to my metric actually will affect existing content in my Lightdash project. So here we've created a preview environment and we can go ahead and open it up. And unlike before, now your production content is actually copied to your preview environment. So this is one of the changes that we made. So all the charts and the dashboards that you have in production, you can now interact with in your preview environments. And this is one of the big changes as well that I want to talk about, which is the validation notifications. So under that notification icon, we'll see all of the validation errors, if there are any. And so this will open up into this table, which has information about when the validation was run, the content that's broken, and then the error that's causing the content to be broken. So you have charts, you have dashboards, sometimes you'll have tables. You're able to rerun the validation by clicking on this button. And we can interact with the content and actually see the errors by clicking on the entries in the table. So here we see there's a chart that's broken. If we kind of zoom into it a bit more, we can see that it's because there's this metric that's being referenced in the results table that doesn't exist anymore because we renamed it. So this is the first way of interacting with validation in Lightdash, is by building preview environments, and then within those preview environments you'll get a notification about validation errors. The same thing happens in your production environment, it's just you're in production instead of in a preview. So you'll still get notifications for validation errors in production. Now, in case, let's say you're developing and you don't really want to run a Lightdash preview project because, I don't know, you don't need to play around with the metrics you're building, you're confident in your dimensions or whatever, you can just run Lightdash Validate directly on your CLI, and that will run a validation the same way that the validation appears in your project, actually in the UI. So it'll tell us about the number of errors to tables, charts, and dashboards, and then it'll give us a list of all of the errors. So it'll tell us the name of the content that's broken, and then more information on the error that's causing that content to break. But the reality is we probably don't want to interact with this in the CLI. So we give a link to you at the bottom to be able to go to this table directly in your UI and interact with these errors and kind of dig into them a bit more from within your project directly. And yeah, those are the two main ways that you can actually validate your content using the Lightdash Validator. The third and final way is by adding a GitHub action. So you can actually prevent people from merging PRs by requiring that Lightdash validation has to pass. That's included in our docs, and I'll let you get comfortable with that in your own time. I won't demo it here. But today, these are the two examples that I have of how I commonly include Lightdash validation in my data development workflow. So if we think about my experience back when I was developing my metrics and it broke a bunch of content, instead of having that horrible experience where I broke a bunch of really important things, now I could just run Lightdash validate or build a preview environment and check that my changes weren't affecting any of the content in production. So that's the kind of overview of Lightdash validation. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out in our Slack community, or if you have any other questions, check out the docs, check out our blog posts, and check out our Headway updates to see about all the features that we're building and the exciting things that are coming with Lightdash. I hope you learned something, and thanks so much for listening.